This is the eHealth Radio Network, your source for health advice on demand. And now your host, Eric Michaels.
Thanks for joining us once again here on the eHealth Radio Network. This is your host, Eric Michaels. Today we're speaking with Beth Bell. Her soul's journey has taken her around the world to live, starting with humble beginnings in North Dakota to California to New York City, Singapore, India, Bali, and now back in California. She spent 15 plus years in strategic brand management in the pharmaceutical industry before becoming an entrepreneur and developing inspirational products. She currently produces and co-hosts the Psychedelic Sages podcast and is an advisor to CEOs and psychedelic pharmaceutical companies. Her new book, Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, shares her journey and awakening and provides a spiritual toolbox others can learn from. And Beth, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, great to have you out, Beth. Thanks for your time and looking forward to hearing from you. So you mentioned in the book, for starters here, in the introduction to your book, that your parents questioned whether you should publish the book. Why were they so concerned about your publishing the book?
Yeah, I think every parent has the fear of their child being exposed. And because I am so vulnerable in the book, I think they really just had a fear of the naysayers and the stone throwers. And yet I just felt so divinely guided that this book needed to go out because of the vulnerability and because that's the way we can connect with other people and talk about how we've overcome challenges and we can learn from one another. So for me, it was a no doubt the book was going to go, but my parents were certainly a little bit hesitant for me to really just expose myself with so many of the life lessons that I've learned along the way.
Now, tell me, what would you say the main theme of your book is, and what's the message that you want to get across?
Well, it is an awakening memoir. And what I mean by that is I came from a very traditional Midwestern background with a corporate focus and a life plan. And Spirit said, there's another plan, and it's called your soul's plan. And when you work your soul's plan, you actually don't have to work as hard or maybe in suffering. I should say that you do still have to work hard in the sense, but it's with ease and grace. And I know that sounds like a dichotomy, but that's what I speak about in the book, is all these different healing modalities that help me understand that it was actually my ego mind in the driver's seat. And that's kind of like putting a 2-year-old in front of the wheel. And so the idea is to get the ego mind in the back seat and to have your soul driving in the front seat.
Now, you also talk about breaking through beliefs and tapping into your inner wisdom. What exactly does that mean? Take us further with that question there.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of us don't actually know that the mind is actually controlling us. And a lot of times we'll get intuitive hits. We'll have a sense of knowing about something, but we don't always have the data that our Western upbringing tells us we need to have in order to make a jump. And so I've really relied on what I call intuitive risk taking, which is getting more in touch with that inner wisdom. And it means that we have to quiet the mind. Now, I know how difficult that is. I still struggle with it today. It's an ongoing journey, but we have to find a way to really get our minds to quiet that chatter, especially that chatter that has negative things to tell us and that tries to take us off our course and, quite frankly, just doesn't make us feel good. Any of those thoughts are the ego mind. Anything that comes from love and our true self and our soul's plan is going to make us feel great. And so we need to find ways to get in touch with that. For me, actually, it was a really interesting, it's not really a trick, but I feel like it was kind of a trick by the universe that I started photographing flowers. I knew that I needed to meditate more, but every time I sat down for 15 minutes, I was like, I'm not going to get that 15 minutes back. And there's so many things that I could have gotten done. And so I started photographing flowers. And over time realized that that was the way the universe got me to slow my mind down to a point where I actually started to get really inspirational messages from the flowers, really from my higher self. But that was a way that got me into quieting the mind. There are so many different ways to do it, but we don't get taught them when we're young. And so we kind of wait until the suffering comes in or life just feels like it's not going in the right way, or, we get down on our knees and then we say, okay, there must be another way. And so all I'm trying to suggest is that why not start that way right now and just get on the awakening journey. If you are already on it, keep going, because it can be challenging sometimes. It is a different way of navigating through life, but it is with ease and grace.
And really some good points made right there. And slowing down the mind is such a challenge these days. And I am really glad that you touched on that. Today we're speaking with Beth Bell, who currently produces and co-hosts the Psychedelic Sages podcast and is an advisor to CEOs and psychedelic pharmaceutical companies. Her new book, Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, shares her journey of awakening and provides a spiritual toolbox others can learn from here on eHealth Radio's Health News Channel, a part of the eHealth Radio Network. Now, of course, you do have a very intriguing title, but it doesn't give us any clues as to how they are related to each other or the content of the book. Can you give us some cliff notes here? I'm sure listeners would appreciate that.
Yes, I can. Angels is all about recognizing that we are divinely guided by angels in paranormal realms, but also on the earth plane. There are people that come into our life that are absolute angels, and they come in at times that we don't expect. So it's really having a greater awareness about how angels are guiding us so that we don't feel alone sometimes on this journey. Herpes is a really intriguing topic, and we could have a whole episode on that alone. But I really wanted to get into virus shame. I recognize with COVID that everyone started to understand the concept of virus shame. And so I felt that putting that on the cover was a way to get people talking about difficult conversations. And it may be trauma that they've experienced from sexual abuse or abandonment or whatever their core trauma is. A lot of things cause us trauma that we just stuff down. And so it's all about getting back to the viruses of the mind and unraveling them so that we can unveil the illusions. So the herpes component is, and of course there's some really interesting stories in the book that talk very specifically about herpes, but one of the main reasons is so people would ask about it and people would actually get into difficult conversations about viruses in general, whether it's COVID or viruses of the mind. So that kind of bookends that. And then psychedelics was something that I never thought I would ever do. I come from big pharma, and I have a very interesting spiritual journey, but I always thought that drugs have been an absolute no-go for me. And it was really my relationship with the flowers that started to help me understand the power of plants. So I got introduced to plant-based medicines that really changed the way that I looked at everything. And I see now how psychedelics can really provide us a North Star, like that point that we're looking to hit, which is that very blissful state of oneness that we're looking to embody here on planet Earth. Sounds unattainable in some ways, but it is absolutely attainable, and heaven on earth is attainable, and psychedelics help people understand that. And with my pharmaceutical background, what I found was that there are several pharmaceutical companies specifically looking at psychedelics. So there is data and science that's coming forward, and we're going to be seeing, I think, mental health, mental wellness changed completely in the next few years. So I think by 2023, we're going to start to see some of the first psychedelics on the market. We already have one, which is ketamine. We have just incredible recovery rates on things like suicidal ideation, anxiety, PTSD. So all of these things are being studied, and much, much more. So it's a huge area that's up and coming. And I really feel like we need to shift the narrative around psychedelics. We came from the 60s, 70s war on drugs. I was fully immersed in that narrative. And now I know that there's a different narrative that really needs to come out around how psychedelics can help and can really help heal the mind, because everything is in the mind.
Certainly some interesting information there, and appreciate your feedback and giving us a good idea on what the book is about through the title, Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics. Now, speaking of the book and your purpose, what is your ultimate goal in all this?
My ultimate goal is really to help people be inspired and empowered to dig deeper and to really access their own inner wisdom, because that's where freedom lies. It lies in a way that we can have peace which passes all understanding. And with the chaos that the external world is giving us right now, it is just such an incredible time to actually say, yeah, I want to take the inward search. I want to stop looking at my external environment. Well, of course, you can look at your external environment because it's going to show you what's going on internally. And that's really the point. And the only way to shift it is to shift internally how you think and feel, and then the external environment will follow. So I think COVID gave us just an incredible opportunity to look at the four walls that we've built, to look at our lives in a different way. Some people really heeded the call, others haven't. I think my book is really for the ones who've heeded the call and said, I want to find another way. I want to contribute to humanity. I want to heal myself. I want to awaken. I want to live with ease and grace. And I want to contribute to humanity in a way that's really taking us to the next level, as opposed to diving deeper into the crap of the minutia of what's going on, in the media and in our communities. We want to stop all those mind viruses and really unravel that so that we can live in the bliss of divine oneness.
Yeah, the external world is certainly a crazy place for sure. I agree with that. Lastly, what do you mean by expanded states of consciousness? And if we're not sleeping, aren't we all conscious?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think that we know, maybe an easy example is we're here on the earth. And when you go down below into a submarine or you go scuba diving, you realize, oh my gosh, there's a whole nother world down there, something that just blows your mind. You're like, I had no idea that this existed. So that's what I mean by expanded states of consciousness. You start to understand ideas and concepts that are so much more expanded, because what happens when we come into this lifetime is we start to develop programs, and a lot of the programs are necessary for us, but a lot of the programs are not. They're thought constructs and they're ideas that we really get ingrained in our mind, and we create patterns. And then we see those patterns play out over and over and over again. And so what I'm offering is, hey, stop the patterns, blow up the patterns, unravel the mind and the ideas and these thought constructs that come forward that just keep creating the same stuff that we don't want. And so as we expand our consciousness, we expand the way that we see things. We become more open to new ideas. We start to explore and discover that, hey, maybe there's something more here than what meets the eye. And that's what expanded states of consciousness really means. It's not about just the waking state. It is about expanding. And one of the things that psychedelics has the ability to do is increase neuroplasticity, and it helps to be a pattern disruptor. So if you have a thought pattern that you're seeing in your life over and over and over again, which oftentimes happens with depression, anxiety, it's the same triggers that take us into the same storylines. And when we can pattern disrupt that, which many psychedelics can do, we get a relief from that circuitous loop of thoughts, so we can go, oh, there's something more. And we can start to feel our energy come back into our bodies, and we can really react to the external world in a much more neutral way, as opposed to this charged way that just keeps bringing more of what we don't want. And when we change that inner compass and we go to our true north and we follow our soul's plan, then we're not being controlled by everything else happening in the external world.
Beth, again, we want to thank you for joining us here today on eHealth Radio. And of course, you are the author of the new book, Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics. Tell us, where can listeners not only find the book, but also get more information on yourself as well?
The best place is to go to Beth Bell or bethbell.me. So bethbell.me, not .com. And you can also find an Awakening and Healing Handbook on the website as well, which provides even more insights into the spiritual journey. But you can definitely get the book on all platforms, Amazon, on the website. So that's the best place to find me. And you can also find the podcast there as well.
And that certainly works. We'll leave that link within the show notes of this broadcast. Beth, all the best. Thanks for joining us here today on eHealth Radio. Certainly was our pleasure.
Thanks, Eric.
Again, we've been speaking with Beth Bell, who currently produces and co-hosts the Psychedelic Sages podcast and is an advisor to CEOs and psychedelic pharmaceutical companies. Again, her new book is Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, sharing her journey of awakening, and provides a spiritual toolbox others can learn from. And for further details, simply visit bethbell.me. And again, this has been your host, Eric Michaels, and we do thank you for your continued support of the eHealth Radio Network. Join us again soon for another episode that will help further expand your knowledge on those things that are important to your health and wellness. For more eHealth Radio reports, we invite you to visit our main radio channel site at eHealthRadioNetwork.com. And as always, we do thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the eHealth Radio Network. For more information or to subscribe to this podcast, visit eHealthRadioNetwork.com.